This video might speed up your game by 50% with no loss of fun or immersion. Welcome back everybody, this is GDS. Today's video is going to be about the most important question that a GM asks their players. But before we start this video, I want you to go to the blah blah below and let me know, how do you do descriptions in your game? I get the impression that different GMs do it differently. Some people might write it down and some people might just make it up on the spot, maybe something in between. This is a small channel, I don't get many comments, so if you comment below I'm going to see it, heart it, and probably respond, so let's get a conversation going. Every evocative description that GMs come up with eventually end with one important question. What do you do? This is the most important question a GM can ask their players because it is what creates agency in the game, which is the entire point of tabletop RPGs. Because the question is so important to ask, some GMs feel that the more they ask it, the better. That is the wrong thing to do. Sometimes, what do you do is the wrong question to ask. It's the wrong question when the players don't have a meaningful choice. What is a meaningful choice? A meaningful choice has two criteria. The first one is that players should be able to have some insight into the consequence of their actions. Some insight doesn't mean complete insight. Of course, decisions that players make can have unintended consequences. But the idea is to have enough information to distinguish one choice from another. If I describe a dungeon to you and you're in a maze and I ask you if you want to go left or right, without any further information, you might as well just flip a coin and choose whatever that chooses, because you don't have any information to distinguish these two choices. But if I add extra description on top, for example, I say that there is a light emanating from the left hallway and a putrid smell coming from the right hallway, well, this doesn't give you too much information. You still have something that allows you to distinguish one choice from another and make a meaningful choice. And then the second criteria is that a meaningful choice is not a no-brainer. Whatever players choose, given the amount of information they have, there must be something that they give up in making that choice. This is called a trade-off. For example, imagine a situation where your players are going through some kind of mansion and they're looking for a party that they are late for. They have a choice between going left, which is a dark hallway, and between going right, which has light and from which they hear laughter and chatter. The choice here is obvious. They are going to go right because that's probably where the party is. Keep in mind that a meaningful decision can have a best choice. The important thing is to make sure that given the amount of information players have, they can't determine which choice is always the best. Here is a good rule of thumb for when you shouldn't be asking your players, what do you do? Because there's probably not a meaningful choice. You should not do it when you can answer your own question with, well, what do you think they're gonna do? Going back to the example, they can go left to the dark hallway or right to the sounds of party. Well, what do you think they're gonna do? They're gonna go right to the sounds of party. So don't even give them that choice. Players don't always have a meaningful choice. And that's okay. It's natural in storytelling, and also making choices all the time can be draining because choices can be wrong. So when you don't ask players, what do you do? Well, what do you do? It turns out you describe. Figuring out when it's the right moment to ask players what they do and when to just describe is an important GM muscle to flex. If you describe when you should be asking them what they do, then they feel like they have no agency. And if you do the opposite, if you ask them what they want to do when you should be describing, then you just sit there waiting for them to make the correct choice, which slows the game down. Many of my videos focus on player choices because that is such an important part of the game. But in this video, I want to focus on the other half of what DMs do, which is describing. Here I have 3 tips for you for how and when you should describe. The first tip is that you should focus on details that are important for player choice. A popular writing truism is show, don't tell. And the reason it's a truism is because, well, it's not true. Especially when you're describing things in person using your voice, rather than writing things down, players only have a limited context window of words that they can keep in their heads at the same time. In other words, let's say you say something that's 10,000 words, players may only be able to concentrate on 500 at a time. This is why it's important to be frugal with your descriptions. You are working with a finite resource. Your players' attention and ability to hold multiple ideas in their heads at the same time. So sometimes you need to tell, you need to use fewer words to catch players up to what's happening. And sometimes you need to show, specifically when the players need to experience something important. For example, let's say you're setting up a scene and you're trying to make sure the players are caught up onto where this scene is happening. Instead of describing it as a stout building where people are laughing and there is the smell of alcohol and you see taps connected to barrels, just say it's a tavern. Your players and their characters know what a tavern is. So when you use that word, the players' brains will immediately fill any gaps that you don't describe, allowing you to focus on the important details that you do want to describe. Say the reason the tavern is important is because it's a meeting spot for an order of knights. So I'll just describe it as a tavern and use my descriptions to, say, describe knightly things on the walls, maybe suits of armor that look old and very realistic. And is that blood on that sword over there? The idea is to focus on important details rather than wasting your description on mundane details. A common difficulty in description is in mysteries, because in mysteries, information is the currency of progress. You want to make clues challenging to detect because you want players to feel as though progress is earned. But players are smart, and when you spend extra time describing something, they will catch on and realize that is a clue and is important. The way to resolve this is to abstract clues one level up. So for example, if an important clue is that the table at the tavern has green apples, you can describe there being a basket of apples on the table. And if the important thing is not the color of the apples, but that they are apples as opposed to other fruits, then you can simply describe a basket of fruit on the table. And if the important thing is that there is fruit on the table at all, you can describe it as there being food on the table. You get it. The idea is to abstract the description enough so that players don't immediately notice it's an important clue. Moving on to the second tip I'm going to give you here, which is don't be afraid to fast forward. I told you about how sometimes you don't want to ask the players what do you do because they don't have a meaningful choice. Sometimes long periods of time can pass in the game with the players having no meaningful choice. That's fine. That happens. It's okay. Just fast forward. If players walk into a tavern and nothing of interest happens until midnight, you don't need to ask them what they do. Just tell them they sit around, probably talk to strangers, order some food and some drinks, and fast forward to midnight. In other words, instead of asking the players what they do, just sit back and think to yourself for a second, what do I think the players are going to do? Ah, yes, there is an obvious answer. You can fast forward hours, days, or even weeks. If players need to catch a train to the other side of the world and it's going to take several weeks, there is no problem with fast forwarding that, giving some evocative, fun descriptions, and just resuming play when they arrive at the destination. Players won't feel robbed as if you took agency from them because during that entire time, they wouldn't have a meaningful choice. The alternative is that you ask them what they do and they're like, I sit on the train and I wait for a week. The last and third tip I have for you for a description is what I like to call grounding your world. The 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique is something that people are taught to do to decrease their anxiety and their feeling of being overwhelmed by grounding themselves in the present moment using their 5 senses. By focusing on what you can see, hear, smell, and taste, you take your attention away from anxious, overwhelming thoughts to the present moment. One of the reasons I think this works so well is because when you appeal to every one of the 5 senses, it's easy to connect to the world around you. And we can use this when we are describing our world to ground our players' minds in those fictional spaces. For example, let's say we're describing a grimy cyberpunk subway. What we're going to do is we're going to focus on 5 things we can see, 4 things we can touch, 3 things we can hear, 2 things we can smell, and 1 thing we can taste. This doesn't mean that your description needs to include all of them, but they will probably give you great candidates to create an evocative description of the place. So you can write this in your notes. Let's do it. 5 things you can see in a cyberpunk subway. You can see the neon lights reflecting everywhere. You can see pools of an unidentified liquid everywhere. You can see maybe some poor people hanging around because it's cyberpunk and there's, income inequality. You can see some guards that are walking around with big, massive guns. Let's say there is some ash and mud on the floor. You can see your own footprints in there, and you can see the approaching subway that you need to take. 4 things you can touch. You can feel the slime and the muck under your boots. You can feel the warm air of the subway on your skin as the trains pass by. You can feel your weapons kind of bumping up and down as you're walking, and you can feel your hidden pistol in your boot. 3 things you can hear. There is a faraway siren, there is the whirring of machines, and maybe you hear people talking around you. 2 things you can smell. Maybe the sour stench of decomposing technology, and let's see, what else would you be able to smell in a cyberpunk subway? Let me know in the comments below with absolutely no context. And 1 thing you can taste. Let's say you just bought some cyberpunk street food and you're tasting that and it tastes maybe a little strange. I don't know what they put in there. But you get the idea. The idea is to ground players in your world by using evocative descriptions that appeal not just to one sense or eyes, but to all 5 senses. 1 more secret final tip for this is if you're playing online, you can use audio to ground your players with what they hear. For example, if they're being chased by a monster down a hallway and they close the door behind them, you can describe the monster, sniffing around for them, and you can even sniff into the microphone. That tends to creep out players. I won't do it here, but you can try it yourself and listen back. It creeps out players because the audio that they would hear, they hear in their headphones because you're playing online. That's just a tip you can do. That's everything I have for this video. To summarize what we did is, we said that while the most important question the GM asks the players is, what do? You don't always want to ask that question because sometimes players don't have a meaningful choice. And that's okay. Because when that doesn't happen, you do the other half of what GMs do, which is describing. I gave you 3 tips on how to describe, and maybe a 4th mini tip. That's everything I have for the video. I hope you liked it. If you did, smash your face fully into the screen and hit the like button and the subscribe button. I hear there's a bell that will give you notifications. I can't tell you how much this stuff helps me. Because I honestly don't know. I don't think anyone does. I don't think people know how the algorithm works, and I don't either. There's a Discord. It's not a secret. Check it in the nonsense below. That's pretty much it. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. I'll see you later.